All right. Yeah. I guess we have to decide, is this an ethical violation or is it a criminal violation? If it's a criminal violation, of course, it needs to be decided in the courts and there might be monetary compensation. If it's an ethical violation, then who's to say? I guess the board, the doctor's board, whatever that is, some sort of governing body, and then how is recompense made?
I just don't see how you can prove that's a criminal.
Yeah, I mean, I
There's
think
no way
that they should be paid, but I don't see how you can prove that it was criminal.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that maybe the family does deserve something, honestly, but I don't see how they can prove it's criminal.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Not
she
in this
did.
time
She signed
period.
papers, and on top of that, it wasn't illegal.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I really don't see how.
And also, it's not like everything they did with this was like straight profit, straight greed. I mean, it helped people.
Yeah.
It did.
And the original intent was not greed. In fact, remember, the doctor created it all himself. He paid for everything himself. It was makeshift. He gave all of the samples away. And it's what people did after the fact.
I mean, I do think like the family at first, I think their main issue on why they wanted money was because they know they were poor.
Oh, I think
They
they
felt sick.
poor family. But that poor family, but then also I think a lot of other poor families who have alcoholic, abusive fathers and mothers who die from cancer, who are stuck in a cycle of poverty. So I don't know. Like I said, it's a really slippery slope with this family and other families. And I'm sympathetic to their situation, but I don't know what the proper way is to fix it. Hey, let's go on to our husband, Dave. What do you think about her husband? Because that's another discussion question there.
I don't know.
I mean, he cheated on her, right? Because he gave her gonorrhea.
Well, he gave her gonorrhea and syphilis. Yeah, I mean, and he was known to be a cheater. Think of the time period. What?
Did she just not care, or was it like she had a lot going on? She just wasn't worried
She had a
about
lot
it?
of kids.
I think it's time period and cultural.
Okay.
She probably had to make a decision.
I think it's time period and cultural.
Like what Miss Leopard's saying, she probably had to make a decision between doing what was best for herself and doing what was best for her family. And I thought that was kind of a big theme throughout, that she did what was best for her family rather than herself.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. She wouldn't have been able to divorce him.
Right.
She didn't seem unhappy with her marriage. She seemed happy with her marriage. The way that, anyway, Rebecca Skloot writes it is that she accepted her fate. And I think it was a cultural thing too, though, because think of the way she was brought up.
Yeah.
I mean, when her mother died, her dad shipped them off to different relatives. And then they would meet up at the home where her grandfather was. And then that was a weird situation because there were cousins all over the place. Right? And she was pregnant by the time she was 14. I think it was 14. I can't remember. And she didn't get married until she was 20. So culturally, it was accepted. And it was also known that a lot of the boys liked their little cousin girls, right?
Oh, that's sick.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's cultural, right? But that openness, where they knew that if cousins were going to sleep together in the same room, something's going to go on, that openness was very common.
That's just was that really common back then?
I think it's fairly common. Yeah, I think it was. I mean, these are country people that all they see is their family.
That's crazy.
Right? I mean, they're not gonna intermingle with other people and other families. They're not in a big city. They lived in a place called Blackstown, which is where they all were. It was like a compound. I mean, you form relationships with those people that you are constantly around. We just happen to be more mobile. We can drive, 500 miles down the road and meet someone. We can fly across the country. Back then you couldn't. They grew up and those were their constant companions. So the idea that they would form relationships I think is pretty common.
That's still weird though.
I don't think it was about making the bloodline pure, but yeah, I remember the royalty used to do it as well. It was not an uncommon practice. I mean, you married who you knew. In fact, they even went to jobs. Remember when they moved to Baltimore for the steel mill? They moved because cousins came back and they saw that they were doing well, and they're like, hey, you know, come on down over here to Baltimore and you guys can do well too. And so they did. But as far as Day, what do you think about him? Was he a good husband? I don't like him. I don't like him.
I mean, yeah, if you cheat on your wife, I probably, that's probably.
Yeah. Well, regardless of the time period, though,
Yeah.
as far as cheating on your wife, it seemed like she did an awful lot of physical suffering, and he didn't really notice it or,
Right.
Yeah.
Care. It just seems odd to me that he would just drop her off at the hospital.
Yeah.
What kind of loser does that?
What?
I said, what kind of loser does that?
I know, right? And then just, she had to have some sort of physical symptoms, and more than just lethargy. She had to be physically drained and look physically, regardless of her saying, oh, no, I'm okay.
Right.
I mean, people say, oh, no, I'm okay all the time.
Oh, yeah, like, oh, are you okay? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. And then he goes off and he drinks and stuff. And then, of course, after Henrietta dies, what happens? Okay, so he needs the help of other people, and then the children become abused.
Yeah.
By, was it his cousin? Or no, it was a girl who married someone else and then had like the hots for Day. And so to take it out on Henrietta, I guess post-mortem, she abused the children.
And then he abused the children too, right?
He did. Yes, he did. And then he also ignored the fact that Deborah was getting sexually molested at the age of 14.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember, they were in the car and he's like telling her to get in the car, and he's there fooling around with the wife in the front while the husband is in the back molesting Deborah.
Yeah, that's
Remember that scene?
That's messed up.
So, I mean, when you consider those types of things, he seems to be a very selfish person.
Very selfish. It was, and I guess they kind of, it was probably the author's, well, I guess not the author's thing because it's nonfiction, but just how the two characters of, the husband and wife are just so completely, juxtaposed,
Yeah, they are.
They're so different in every way.
They are completely opposite. And I think what we need to notice is how Rebecca Skloot, how the author doesn't really put in a whole lot of emotion when she describes them. She describes them almost matter-of-factly, right? Just as, here's what happened, here's how Deborah felt, but that's it. She leaves it to the reader to sort of develop the I don't know, any sort of emotion that the people actually have.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, I don't have the other ones in front of me. Let's talk about the way this thing is written. So what do you notice about the way she writes the narrative of the life and with the science of this discovery? How do you notice that the author does this? Look, she's bored. Do you see her?
Look at that big old dog.
What? Oh, he hasn't won anything? But today's my dad's birthday, and I gave him lottery tickets over there.
Oh, yeah.
He hasn't won anything yet. Oh, man. That's not good. I gave him $20 or 20 scratch-offs. No, I gave him 10 scratch-offs. Anything else you guys want to talk about as far as the book? I mean, I want you to notice that this nonfiction piece the thing with nonfiction, and I'll probably push out some sort of presentation for you on nonfiction story writing that's not novel writing, that's not a biography, is that you have to be very careful about fictionalizing conversations and fictionalizing emotions that the characters might have, because you don't know. Unless, like, Rebecca Skloot got to interview the children, right? But she didn't get to interview Henrietta and some other people. She did a lot of it word of mouth. So if you notice, what she does is she takes the biography of the life and she separates it from the science. So if you notice, there were lots of these big open spaces. Did you see that? Where life would be discussed, and then big open space, and then the science would be discussed. That's a very common element in a nonfiction novel. Another thing that you'll notice is that she left the dialect in the actual text when people were talking. So she took extensive notes on how people spoke.
Yeah.
So I think that was really good. She didn't feel the need to change it for character development. She left it because she literally is giving a firsthand account. Ooh, yay! A firsthand account of interviews. So, and I like that she gave the disclaimer at the very beginning saying, here's how I did this. I had a lot of notes. Everything's verbatim except for clarity where I need to clarify things. But if you also notice, it's really easy to read because there's not a whole lot of emotion and a lot of the story of the family. It's interesting, but I don't get it sugar-coated. I don't get it glossed in any sort of way. It reads almost like a journalistic event. Like,
yeah, it does. I see what you're saying.
So that's some of the things that you need to notice. That's the difference between an autobiography, a biography, and a fictional novel is, in a biography, you have pretty much just straight up facts, and that's it. And in a novel, you have to have that element of plot also tied in there. So Jackson was saying how the two characters of Day and Henrietta are juxtaposed. That's a literary device. That's a literary feature. You don't have to do that in a biography. You do have to do that in a novel, though. You do have to develop character in the novel. So the fact that we only get this type of information from Day, and we don't get a lot of the positive information about Day, that is a literary element that she takes advantage of for a nonfiction novel, because she does have to somehow make one of the characters more likable than the other. She does have to create conflict, right? The way that she creates plot, I think, is really interesting as well. She goes in chronological order, as far as, like, she gets us at the very end. Here's what we're going to see at the very end. And then she takes a huge flashback and says, okay, let's start from the beginning. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's almost like we have a framed story here. We have what we know to be the ending product of this woman's life, right? And then we have the author saying, okay, here's the ending product of this woman's life. Now let's go back and see the story. And then we go through this narrative and we get back to now the beginning part of the product. Do you see what I mean? So this works a lot like a framed story. Did we read Ethan Frome?
No.
Dang it. They're reading it this year, because I think they're going to read it this year for online. In English 3, I'm not sure. But it's the same sort of story. It's a narrator saying, here's the final product. Oh, wow. Well, in order to understand this, let's go back to the beginning. Huh. So that's another element that she uses here in this nonfiction novel that ties it into what a novel actually does. The language as well, the dialect, leaving dialect and dialogue is another element of a literary fiction piece that is used for this nonfiction novel. And I guess that's pretty much it. We have a lot of plot development, a lot of setting and scenery in this particular book as well that ties it into a novel situation for a nonfiction. So,
it was good.
Yeah. Do you guys like this book?
I liked it.
Yeah.
I am liking this. I'm like that part. I wanted to wait till our discussion because I knew that if I read the whole thing and then did the discussion, I'd be confusing things up. But yeah, I really like it a lot. It's really good.
Yep.
Any other questions? Anything else? Are we pretty good? Your discussion post is due on Monday. If you need help on it or whatever, because I know this one's kind of weird, you guys just drop me a line through Google Hangouts or Google Meets, and we can chit chat about it before you guys actually have it finalized, if you want. But I think this might be pretty easy. The hardest one, I think, is whether or not they should have money, because you have to have textual support. But otherwise, I think the other ones should be pretty easy to do. But like I said, if you need help on these, just drop me a line. We good? Everyone feeling healthy?